event is called Government is the Funder of Science and Employer of Scientists. It's being hosted jointly by the New Zealand Association of Scientists and the Public Service Association. I'm going to quickly, very pleased to introduce today the candidates who have come to talk to us about their party's science policies. We have Dr. Aisha Verrill, who is a candidate for the Labour Party and the current Minister of Research, Science and Innovation. We have Dr. Frances Hughes from the National Party, who is the candidate for the electorate of Mana. We have Taylor Arnell, the New Zealand First candidate for Wellington Central. We have, I believe, Dr. Ben Wiley Van Eerd, who is the Opportunities Party candidate for Hatsouth. Also informed is on the PSA Science Committee for PSA members joining us today. And hopefully at some point we will also have Kiana Tuiono, who is the Green Party Research, Science and Innovation spokesperson, joining us. A little information about the hosts. So the PSA is Aotearoa's largest trade union, representing over 90,000 workers in the public and community services, including in both the core public services and wider public services. It represents within the science sector over 2,500 workers within CRIs and over 400 in universities, as well as a range of people within the public sector who either work with science directly or advise on science policy or are connected to science through their work. The PSA's job is to improve the working lives of its members and be a public voice for policies that improve public services and better working conditions for the benefit of all of us. The New Zealand Association of Scientists, which I am the co-president of, is an independent incorporated society and registered charity that stands for and advocates for science and scientists in Aotearoa, New Zealand. Our association is made up of a wide cross-section of the science community, promoting public awareness of science and encouraging scientific excellence, as well as promoting debate and research on science and science policy and engaging with government on the development of national science policy. So this event, which we are co-hosting, will be run for an hour, although that hour has already started. There will first be 90 seconds for each of the candidates to make an initial address. I'm going to ask them to do that just so they know from left to right, their left and my left. The initial address will focus on their vision for the research, science and innovation sector and their party's plans to achieve it. We'll then ask some pre-prepared questions of the candidates, and then we'll open up to questions from the audience. And once again, you can see on screen who our candidates are today. We will be using something called Slido to gather audience questions. So if you can, as you see on the slide, go to slido.com and use that code or scan the QR code, and you can participate in some polls we're going to be running through the event, as well as give us your questions and upvote questions so we can pick the ones that there's the most audience interest in. There's a couple of set questions in Slido for you to answer. About the first one, which is showing on screen, is the one about who you are, to give our candidates a sense of who the audience is. We'd love if you could answer that right now. And in a minute, we're going to ask you to give us some information about your concerns for the research and science sector. And please do answer these, as we're going to be asking our candidates to respond to them, particularly the second question. So the answers for the current poll will be shown on the screen. And let me see if I can do that right now. There we go. So currently, of the people who have responded, 58% are from the Crown Research Institutes, 20% are from other, and 9% are from somewhere, but what they feel is most important is that they're on a precarious contract, as well as 6% from university academics, 4% students, and 3% independent, and potentially unsurprisingly no one from overseas. And that's out of nearly 120 responses. So we'll move now to the initial address from candidates. So again, going from left to right, if you could speak for about 90 seconds on your vision for the research system and research careers in Aotearoa, New Zealand. And if you can talk briefly about what steps your party is proposing if they were in government in the next term to achieve this vision. It looks like Dr. Frances Hughes is first, so please start.
Kia ora, ko Frances Hughes ahau. The backdrop of a vision for a national is that we have a strong economy, address the cost of living, because that is affecting every resource in the country at the moment. We believe in a strong science and research systems which allows us to keep growing and become the top of the game globally and recognised for world-leading innovation. We believe that you deserve the tools that you need and the resources that you need to progress your research. We believe through a supportive, strong government, we believe that innovation will deliver those tools to you and embrace new technologies, which will also embrace things for farmers right through to health research. We believe that the biotechnology rules and our biotechnology policies are the way that will liberate us in the future and make us fit for purpose. We believe that unless we embrace and remove the ban on GE and GM, have a new regulator which will ensure we have safety and ethical considerations, and we allow for you to reduce some bureaucracy around the way that we conduct research trials in New Zealand with a number of grants, that will be the format. But sitting centre for us is a strong government with a strong economy. It is through research and science that we will grow this economy, and that means that we must attack the issues that are affecting us, from climate change to agriculture to health. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Taylor Neil. It's always good to come back to Vic Uni and talk, especially since I'm a graduate of this university. New Zealand First believes, and we want to have a research and development sector that is actually able to take and survive those hard economic hits and major world events such as COVID-19, because as we have seen, the institutions that a lot of researchers rely on, when those big economic hits happen, they are suddenly having to take major cutbacks, and as a result of that, more academics and more researchers leave the country because they cannot get that assistance. One of the ways that we want to try and fix this issue is encourage there to be more Crown industry partnerships when it comes down to research, so that we are able to encourage people to research, and that where there is a relationship between especially manufacturing and research, you can have a very clear deliverable go, and then that research that you can do can end up changing the world and actually be exported around the world to help us combat issues such as climate change, such as issues in health. So that is what we are wanting to see.
Tēnā koutou, my name is Aisha Burrell and Labour Party spokesperson for Research, Science and Innovation. New Zealand faces a slew of wicked problems, from climate change to low productivity in our economy, through to complex health and social issues. I know, as a former scientist, that science is what unlocks our ability to deal with them. I also know from the researchers I've worked with that that's what scientists want to do. They want to change the world and they want to have impact. That's why we've brought in the Te Ara Paerangi reforms, in order to be able to shift the system to one that is more able to achieve that impact on some of these really big challenges. That means that while we have excellent areas of work on some of these big challenges, we need to be able to scale and focus a larger quantity of resource on those big challenges. That is why we are going to introduce national research priorities. It means we need to move some of our research focus from areas of our traditional strength, where our economy is already strong, to areas where we could develop new economies and industries. We need to release our talented people from unproductive competition for grants. We also need to grasp the challenge of making our science system more responsive to utility. Now, I'm really grateful for the science community's work with the government on the Te Ara Paerangi reforms, and I'm clear that we have followed through on what those reforms will mean in its first year. We've done a lot in terms of creating new scholarship and fellowship opportunities for Māori and Pacific, and we will have an applied PhD. We've already funded an applied PhD and fellowships program that will roll out next year. Labour also sees science as a way to unlocking our creativity and our economic plan for a low carbon, low emissions, high wage economy. I do want to say that while I'm looking forward in this debate to getting into the nitty-gritty of science policies, wider political issues also impact science. and uncosted tax plans in particular threaten the government's accounts and the ability to continue science funding. So you will see from Labor a fully costed fiscal plan before the election. I'm very eager to keep working with you on these issues. Thank you.
Kia ora koutou. I am Dr. Ben Wiley-Manier, and I represent the Opportunities Party in this debate. I did my PhD in physics at Victoria University. I did a postdoc after that in the University of Twente, and I now work at Callaghan Innovation for my day job. So I'm right in the middle of the New Zealand science sector. I work this every day, and I am familiar with the issues. And we all know that New Zealand has historically had a really good track record of producing highly cited publications, really punching above our weight in that area, and that's a tradition to be proud of. But we've also historically really been behind on translating those scientific outputs into impact in the wider community, whether that be economic impacts or improved health, climate, all those sorts of things. And we've also always fallen short of that gold standard of about 2% of the GDP being spent on research and development, so there's definitely more to do. Part of that is because our investment landscape is so distorted by how dysfunctional our housing market is, but the public investment also has a role to play in reaching that goal. Right now is definitely a pivotal time for the science industry in New Zealand because we're looking at this major change in Te Paerangi, which is designed to address those shortcomings in producing impact on the science. I think it has the potential to be really good for New Zealand and really good for our science workers as well. And a number of other countries around the world have proven that focused innovation policies, such as what's proposed in Te Paerangi, can produce good results. My biggest concern right now is that the program will fail because it doesn't have enough money invested in it. It'll fail to reach those thresholds where you get clusters forming and industries building around, nucleating around these national science challenges. This is where we get the maximum benefit from the reforms that suggest in Te Paerangi. We have to reach those thresholds. And right now, both of our major parties, they're sort of competing a little bit on who can restrain spending the most, who can present the best and the most appropriate cuts to the public service. So I'm worried that Te Paerangi will deliver results if and only if we reach those critical thresholds. If we don't reach those thresholds, we might as well stop the big chain program and just invest more money in the existing ones. TOP is not afraid of making public investments where they can demonstrate good return on investment, good value for money, even if that means increasing our level of government debt, and that's something which does set us apart. Thank you very much.
Thank you, that was good. Right, for the audience, I'm just going to refer you back to the link to join Slido because in a couple of questions we're going to be using your responses to the current poll, which I note that 54 of you have already managed to answer, asking what the most important parts of the New Zealand research system you'd like to see fixed, stabilised or better valued are. So please go and answer that question while our candidates are answering the next question about universities. So candidates, what we'll do is we'll go in reverse order. So now we'll start with Ben at this end and go back. So we're just not always going in the same order. So could you tell us, do you agree that our university sector is in crisis? Are there underlying causes that should be addressed? And what improvements can you propose for the university sector as it relates to research and science?
Yes, I think the system is pretty obviously in crisis. There are job cuts and spending cuts just about across the board right now. Underlying that is that we're seeing the students who want to go and get degrees right now. That is the normal cyclical part that we have to accept as a normal part of university life. But unfortunately, our universities have been run more or less by a corporate model lately that have been really competing for growth in student numbers, which has made them less resilient to downturns. Now, in the corporate world, it's normal and good for companies to compete for growth, and then the losers play out, and the winners grow. But society doesn't lose very much when that happens. This is all in all better business models will replace worse ones. In the university sector, though, this is kind of a disaster, because when people apply entire capability and knowledge, the whole country gets lost. These things take a long time to build up again. You can't just stand them up in a year. You need 5, maybe even 10 to set up really good capability. And if you never think we're going to need it, I mean, imagine if we had gene sequencing capability lost through university competition before 2020. It would have been university system does need to change to something which values stability more than growth. And I think the corporate model is something we need to look at here.
Thank you. So I think universities certainly facing funding pressures at the moment, which is why the government has responded to that by not only delivering the highest increase in tertiary funding through budget 23, that's that the tertiary sector has had in several years, a total of 5% increase, and then an additional increase to address some of these pressures that have come on around job losses. We think this is very serious, and I agree with the analysis that the focus on competition and competition between universities to have that leads to duplication of courses across the country is unhealthy for the sector. That's why, as part of that funding we announced, we also indicated we'd have a review completed by the end of that 2-year funding period that would indicate it. Part of that review that I've been really focused on in the science portfolio is making sure that there is a review of the performance-based research fund there as well. I see that as an important part of having the data only performance threshold objective too.
Well, yes, the sector is in crisis because over the last 3 years we've seen more and more academics and researchers leaving New Zealand because they cannot get the funds that they need in order to conduct their research. One of the biggest problems that I've heard from my old university lecturers is if they want to be able to do research, well, they're not actually eligible for any of the grants or funding. It's all going to have to be self-funded, and at best they could probably get only about halfway through their research before they have to stop. And so that's why we want to see more initiatives and partnerships between industry and researchers so that those researchers can get their funding and have that secure line of funding and not be scrambling halfway through to try and get additional funds. And even when we were in government through the Provincial Growth Fund, we funded a lot of research initiatives that weren't eligible for any funding or struggling to find it, whether that was in the space of climate change or in manufacturing, in land care, or even things like predator-free. And in those areas, they were struggling to get the funding, but we were able to step in and get them that funding. And over the last few years, sadly, quite a lot of those researchers and academics have left the country. So we want to see more of those types of partnerships and work happening.
First of all, I think it's important that we recognise that we have a perfect storm situation, which the universities have absolutely been pushed into. One, first of all, is the domestic student supply, then the issue of overseas students, and then the cost of inflation, which has caused and had big impacts on you as individuals in your everyday life, but also on the universities. So these factors have lined up, and part of what we see as solution is a strong economy, is driving down inflation, is actually liberating some of the big things that are faced you as researchers every day. And that is that, some of the stringent regulations. So national, we are committed to cutting red tapes, and we're committed to providing you with more tools, and within that, being able to address some of your resource issues. The supercharging the international student recruits is one area which we will be coming out with an education policy in the next 2 weeks. But also there needs to be a clear efficiency issue around courses which are not getting the numbers that they should get, and where they should be and how they should be. So these are factors which are beyond some of your control, but we are absolutely listening, hearing from you, and harnessing our biotechnology policy as part of that, because we do believe that we can bring in commercialisation with you to help you through the massive research that you're doing, so that that can bring also funds with you. Thank you very much.
Thank you to all our candidates. Right, the next question is going to be based on the word cloud, which our audience
103 people in our audience have contributed to. So this is asking what the most important parts of the New Zealand research system they would like to see better valued are. And here we go. So clearly the most important issue people are concerned about is funding, but I'm also seeing fundamental science, Tier partnership, funding security, core funding, lack of funding, there's a theme, and job security as issues that people are really interested in. And also, interestingly, I see climate science is and climate change are the only specific areas of the research system in terms of subjects that people are bringing up. So what I'm going to ask everyone to do is take a good look at this slide, and then think about how your party would respond to these issues, particularly the largest ones, in government. And again, we'll start with Dr. Hughes at the far end and then come back.
Okay, so just building on some of the areas that we've covered, is that part of the issue of funding is around the issue of having clear priorities, having a clear plan of delivery on what research and science is for New Zealand, but also allowing you as researchers to build your global expertise to attract some of the resourcing that you should be able to get by creating better efficiencies, but also creating some of the opportunities through addressing some of the regulation. And within our biotech policy, we address some of that. On top of that is being clear that there is areas which we have to deal with as a government. We have to address the strong economy. The pie will only grow as we get a bigger economy and address the big ticket items, which is the cost of living and inflation.
Well, I'm also just going to build on what I was saying earlier, that we want to see more Crown industry partnerships with the research and development space, because, as I was saying again earlier, one of the biggest problems is funding and getting the grants needed so that researchers are able to conduct their research and not get halfway through and then be scrambling in order to try and find additional funds, or having to rely on foreign overseas funds, because that opens up an entire new Pandora's box. And so we want to be able to see more of those partnerships happening, and especially through initiatives like what we did in government with the Provincial Growth Fund, actually looking in those areas such as predator-free that were not previously eligible for grants because they weren't seen as valued. Well, we did see the value in those initiatives and we funded them. So that is the sort of stuff that we would like to see more of.
Thank you. Let's pick up funding, which seems to be a dominant theme there. I'm determined to keep up the growth in our science funding. The main area the Labour government has led to growth in funding has been through the Research and Development Tax Credit, which has supported more than $2 billion, or incentivised more than $2 billion of research and innovation, which is going straight back into our economy. In terms of other funding instruments, I want to see us have a broad base, and by that I mean we need to have a mix of making sure we're funding investigator-led research. Often senior researchers do really well in that, but making sure emerging and mid-career researchers have avenues as well. That's why I've been very focused in year one of Te Ara Paerangi of bringing out fellowships that were funded through Budget 23. We need to have a mix of funding, so we will continue to retain those really important, prestigious funding avenues like Marsden and HRC and so on, and Endeavour, but also others where we can be more directive. Currently, our funding is spread incredibly thin. So how can we actually take on climate change? I remember as Ministers for Seniors, I found out we had a national science challenge in older persons' health, $3 million a year. We all know how much the ageing population is going to cost. How on earth is that investment actually up to the task of having an impact against that challenge? So that's what we want to do through priorities, introduce a new funding stream that will mean that we can be more intentional to have that impact against big challenges. I do want to say one more time that Labour will deliver a fully costed fiscal plan, and that is why the issue about national not being able to fund its tax promises is so important, because that means they come in, they realise they cannot fund their tax cuts, and they go through the government books looking for cuts in order to pay for them. That is what is at risk this election.
Thank you. Looking at these words, I think maybe a good solid third of them are around precarity or security or things like that. It seems like people are really worried about the future of their careers and the future careers for younger people joining the sector. And yeah, I can certainly relate to that as well. I think that the changes that we're looking at with Te Ara Paerangi, they're pointing in the right direction as far as I can tell. The idea of having big chunks of money which are invested in a particular resource and which are designed to last for a long time, to have that stability, are going to be, again, assuming that we get things right with Te Ara Paerangi, I think this is going to be a really good change in that respect. It's going to provide more stability for the workers in the environment and a little bit more flexibility as well when there's a lot of funding around your research area. You know, it's not the case that there's literally only one institution you can do your work at in New Zealand, which will help with things like that. But again, it's dependent on us getting it right, and it works if and only if we put in sufficient funding to reach those thresholds and really see the impacts from it. We are licensed to put money, our public license to put a lot of money into these specific areas relies on the public seeing some good outputs from that as well, some good impact. So yeah, I think it could be really good, and we do have to make sure that we get it right, and that means significant funding for a sustained period of time. Thank you.
Thanks everyone again. All right, we have just heard a bit about Te Ara Paerangi, so it's useful that we are moving to a question about Te Ara Paerangi. So the executive summary of the Cabinet paper which initiated the Te Ara Paerangi process implied a deep loss of trust in research institutions and researchers to deliver on the funding they're currently receiving. But as researchers, we would say that we can't deliver without funding and stability. So we would love all of you to talk about your party's plan to deliver solutions to this dilemma. How do we develop or redevelop that trust in research institutions and researchers to deliver when they are given funding by government?
I start asking, it's my cabinet paper.
What do we think?
Yep, sounds good.
Yes.
I don't think that's what the cabinet paper says. And I took a lot of care with writing it, because someone's got the wrong end of the stick of how I feel about scientists, having been one. My apologies, but I think the point there is that the cabinet paper and the white paper and the green paper before it sought to align funding towards impact. Now that is not, as I said in my previous response, it is not the only thing we're going to do in science. We certainly want to maintain investigator-led work throughout the science system, but we're seeing us struggle to be able to mobilise ourselves around these really, really big challenges like environmental degradation, like climate change, like diabetes in the New Zealand health system. And that's what the problem, the sort of problem statement for Te Ara Paerangi is: how do you achieve impact? So sorry if anyone's got their nose out of joint about that, that wasn't the intention, but I think it goes back to the discussion we had about Te Ara Paerangi before.
Thank you. Could we go back to Ben?
Yeah, so around being trusted to deliver, I think Te Ara Paerangi will help on that, and as we begin to deliver more economic impacts and other outcomes from science that the public can see, we'll start to slowly regain that trust. But I think just trust in science in general is also, I think, a wider issue. Trust in science among the general public is, I guess, lower than it has been in a number of years. We used to hold this public role as the testers and the holders of knowledge. But over the years, we have grown a little bit apart from the public, and I think we need to get back to that. We stopped demonstrating, proving our knowledge to people, we just started saying, trust us, or it's complicated, which is the death knell of public trust in science. I was talking to some old timers back in the days of DSIR, and I learned that they used to just get phoned up by members of the public who had a question. And that's just so incredible to me, that people felt that scientists were so accessible to them, they could literally just pick up the phone. That's where I want to get back to in terms of trust in science. So I think it takes an outreach, it takes actually spending some resource and talking directly to the public, not to our funders, not to our universities, not to our colleagues overseas, but to the public, who are, in the end of the day, the people who fund us. So I want to get back to the point where a member of the public can literally call me on the phone and I can have a good conversation with them. And I think it does require some effort by us as scientists to get there as well.
Well, first, one of the ways that I think we can redevelop or re-get that trust back, if that is what the cabinet paper says, I'm not sure now, is actually ensure that research and development has got a clear goal or deliverable waiting for it at the very end, because one of the biggest cliches that we often hear about research and development is it costs a lot of money and it delivers very little, or there is no clear deliverable at the end. So we're actually ensuring that the research and development initiatives that we're doing have that clear deliverable at the end, where they can say, this is what we want to be able to deliver, and this is how it is going to make a positive impact on the lives of New Zealanders and this country and quite possibly the world. I think that will be one of the key ways that we can deliver the solutions and actually re-get and get public trust back into the system again.
Thank you. And just for those who have any doubt, we clearly stand by our tax policy, and we believe that it is only when we have these substantive policies and a clear government that can manage the economy, the cost of living, inflation, that we can all benefit. Now, saying that, National will undergo a close examination of the current funding streams for the research, science and innovation. We will take an outcomes-based approach, and particularly for climate change, food security and health. These are very big topic items for us. We do believe that the current focus, that there's a current lack of focus, I should say, on the current government policies on the role of research and scientific discoveries on commercialisation. We do believe also that we need clear research and scientific priorities. We need to see that they also have timeframes, and we also believe that it is the enabling technology industry also that will help us to tackle some of the big ticket items that we have, but also allow liberation of you as scientists to be able to address some of your frustration, which is some of the regulatory environment which is causing that. So we have a great deal of trust in our scientists in New Zealand that they would be able to continue to be global experts. We want to grow you as global experts. We do not want to see our scientists having to go offshore to use technologies and innovations in some of your research, because New Zealand does not have the enabling environment to come back to, and that's particularly what we're seeing in some of our agricultural research. Thank you.
Right, thank you everyone. So the next question is contextualised on screen. Essentially, I think a lot of researchers will say they're not very likely to recommend the research to career to young people now, given the challenges inherent in it. So how do we address the challenges we face as a nation and rebuild enthusiasm for the research careers that we need to make the nation smarter, wealthier, healthier and safer?
Is that me again? Yes. Okay. Yeah. First of all, we have integrated approach. So starting with our teaching basics brilliantly, which is our national card policy for education, for that Eric Stanford has put out, we clearly see that the STEM subjects are particularly important. We are never going to grow the scientists like you in the future if we do not start early on in schools and support students, providing the teachers with resources, providing them with the ability to have time to teach, and let alone attract some science teachers back into the sector, be it those who have left or whether it's overseas. The current state of education of the students is alarming to us. The achievement has declined over the last 30 years, and the recent NZAS pilot exposed just how far our achievements have fallen. So by reinforcing STEMs in schools as part of our commitment to children in this country and our future of this country is extremely important. On top of that, harnessing our biotech policy. We have effectively had a ban on GE and technology for 20 years. We believe that with the liberation and a good safety regulator around that will also encourage young people into technology and biotech in particular.
Well, it primarily starts at schools, and so early education and actually encouraging children while they're in school to go into those research and science fields is going to be quite key, because a lot of kids, they don't see themselves going into those fields for one reason or another. The second part is actually ensuring that when they do get into tertiary education at university, they have that support in order to study in those fields. For some of my friends who are doing engineering or science degrees, they had absolutely no spare time whatsoever, but at the end of the week they were broke. They weren't able to make basic ends meet, and as a result they ended up having to drop out of study. And one of the ways that we want to fix that is actually through the universal student allowance, because it is wrong that you're not eligible for government funding to be studying because your parents earn $70,000 a year. That doesn't mean they're going to be able to support you, especially when we're in the midst of the cost of living crisis. So that is one of the ways. First, we want to rebuild that enthusiasm, especially amongst young people, to go into research and science fields.
Yeah, thank you. You know, being a minister, you work with a lot of people to get things done, whether it's to get a successful budget bid, or to get a building built, or to change a policy. But one thing I know I have personally led in the sector is the elevation of emerging researchers as a concern across the sector. I did that by making sure every time I went to a research institute, whether it was a university or a Crown Research Institute, that the CE or the Vice-Chancellor knew that I was also having a meeting with the emerging researchers because I thought they mattered. And that A, helped me feed into the Te Ara Pairangi, the perspectives of emerging researchers. I also created opportunities for emerging researchers to do that themselves, as well as making all the institutions know that our future researchers are as important as our current research leaders today. That's why in the first year of Te Ara Pairangi, the funding that we have got is $50 million for applied PhDs, so finding more avenues for young people interested in research but who may not want that academic career to be able to find a way of bridging that gap between science and industry, science and CRIs. Secondly, the support for fellowships, because this issue of precarity is really, really tough for people, and we do need to be supporting people mid-career. And thirdly, priorities, as we've noted, will be a long-term funding mechanism, which means that people can go through as a cohort and have 10 years without having to fill out a grant application if they're part of the priority and they're wholly within it, in order to be able to develop a cohort of expertise in a particular area. So this has been a big focus for me, and I think we have really, every good opportunity that has come to us, we have taken it seriously and tried to pursue.
Thank you. Lynn first just acknowledged that you have done really good work, Dr. Viral, in supporting early career researchers, and that I think the industry does recognise that. I want to talk about the other end now, the sort of the permanent job side of things. Science careers face a number of challenges that other careers don't. And I think we have to acknowledge that and recognise that within our systems. The main one being that scientific knowledge is extremely specialised. One can't just go and get some experience working in a very specialised field, but then take that to another organisation or institution very easily. But that's how standard labour markets work. In a standard labour market, that is how people are sorted into their most productive roles and how they are rewarded for doing that work. It doesn't function well, that mechanism for science careers, so we do have to do more about that. Now, the step towards narrative CVs for some of our research funds is a really good start. But we also need to make sure that our institutions which provide permanent scientific jobs are able to offer stable roles and more roles, and make sure that they do offer progression within those roles, because it's harder to move from one role to another. Because if we don't make accommodations, the way the market self-corrects is that people just don't become scientists at all. We get this gap that we'll be dealing with for a decade afterwards. So, we need to do something more above and beyond other markets to make sure that science careers can be healthy careers for people that they can work in.
Thank you, everyone. Continuing on the issue of careers, we know that the evidence shows problems with inclusion in research careers for women of all ethnicities and for Māori and Pacifica researchers. That improvements to those problems will not occur without intervention. How much does this concern you and your party, and what are you proposing to do about this?
Yeah, so this is definitely a concern to us. Those gender and ethnic gaps, they open up really, really early on, as early as primary school. So again, it is going to take some time to truly fix them, and therefore it's vital for us to start now. More effort put into public outreach and involvement in science education is a key plank for this. So again, that trust in science thing, science needs to be seen by young people. It's something that can be understood. It's not too complicated. It's not something that only smart people do. You know, science is something that anyone can participate in. Anyone can have a chance of participating in. For our current institutions, continuing to support the Kia Toi Poto program is really important. Making sure that our research organisations are reporting gender and ethnic pay gaps and making plans to address them is a good, sensible bottom line to make sure that we're moving forwards today. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Question very close to my heart. So I think the first thing is to reference the conversation about precarity before. When you have a system where there is literally where researchers pass through this precarious period, you let the market decide who's staying in science rather than their talent and their commitment. So being able to put more people on stable funding is a way to address some of those problems. And as you saw through the Fatina fellowships that you put out during COVID, we did take into account how we had a diverse group of candidates selected for that. We've done a lot. As actually the first press release I put out after Te Aroha white paper was our support for Māori and Pacific researchers, both individual fellowships for research and science, but also innovative, the Te Aroha scheme, really interesting one. And then we've also supported more iwi being able to identify their own research needs and explore how they can fill them. So we are doing quite a lot of innovative work in this area, and I think for me it's really important that the government continues to make space for that and not allow the sort of challenges about whether Māori science is valid to distract from the importance of that work.
Yes, this is a concern, but this is also actually quite personal for me because I lived with a Pacifica guy for about 6 years of my life who was doing computer science and programming, and we would often talk about, well, he would often tell me what the main problems are, why there's so few Māori and Pacific going into those fields to study. And he was a part of the Victoria University outreach program, and he said that the biggest problem that they were facing is actually negative stereotypes. That there was this ingrained stereotype in society that if you're a young Pacific or Māori person, the only way for you to actually be successful in life is in sports. And if you fail at sports, well, then you're going to be a tradie, and if you fail at being a tradie, then you're going to the army. And so one of the biggest ways that we can address this first is actually turning around and telling our young people, no matter who you are, where you are from, or what your background is, you can be the scientist, you can be a programmer, you can be a researcher, and the work that you do could one day go and change the world. That is what we need to do, because he, as part of that outreach program, 2 years into it, was having first year Māori and Pacifica saying to him, I'm only here because I saw you, and I was then actually realised, oh, I don't have to go into sports to be successful in life. You are the example that I can go to university.
Thank you. We say that science careers and research careers should be available to all. We want to make sure that we promote and publish those who are great role models in your science community, but also for the children and the young people to understand how some of our products and services actually come to them, and understanding the science and the people that were involved in developing those. So the stories behind the products and the services, making sure that there is good PR and good career energy out there in schools, but basically we want to see a career for all and available for all, and to ensure that we grow our science and research community.
Thank you. For the online audience, I noticed people are quite keen that we get to some audience questions. The next planned questions we had actually captured sort of a few of the questions I've seen come through and be upvoted, so I'm going to continue with them and amend them based on the upvoted questions, and hopefully that will answer what you're looking for. So the next question for our candidates is research, science and innovation well placed within an NZ, or should it be an independent ministry? And the upvoted question we have notes that it is quite a small part of NZ, which is famously the ministry for everything. Do you think that's potentially impacting the level of attention that research, science and innovation gets?
Yes. Okay. So we have big concerns about it being placed in NZ, but we would not make a comment on this until we are a government and we have the full range of opinions and evidence around that, and also have consulted with the community.
Well, the real question is, if it did have its own department, how much better would that department be at resolving these issues and fixing them? And at the same time, what would the bureaucratic hurdles be that other researchers would have to be going through? Because the last thing that we want to do is have a brand new department created and then all of a sudden it's not doing the job that it is meant to be doing, or researchers are not getting the funding and grants that they need. So that's mainly the question that we should be asking. If we were going to be creating a new department, what would we want that to look like? And that is going to be a question for further down the line when we get into government, because we don't want to create a system that just makes it harder.
I'm aware that this is an issue Sir Blackman has spoken publicly on for several years. Look, I have a pragmatic view. I guess like some of the colleagues who have spoken already on this. I think the key thing for the public and the sector is that there is, you have your own science minister who is the point of accountability for the system. And you know, the feedback I've received from the sector when we've been working on Te Ara Paerangi, I've received quite good feedback about how the officials have convened engagements around that. That won't mean that every interaction with officialdom is perfect, but I tend to think that you only have so much bandwidth when you're in government and you're planning for 3 years. And if I reflect on the experience of the health restructuring, which I totally think was worth it, was an awful lot of work. And I'd rather focus on the things in the Te Ara Paerangi that will actually help, like setting up focused new areas of funding and getting fertility better in place and making sure we're looking after our young researchers than restructuring. That's my view.
Good. Personally, I do think it would be a good idea to move back to a separate Ministry for Science. I've said a number of my answers today that science careers and the practice of science does differ quite a lot from many other industries. And it will be good to have a separate ministry that can reflect that, but I really don't think that now's the time to be embarking on another institutional change. We've got a change program to Paerangi. I really think it makes more sense to follow that one through before we look at changing institutions around it. And I think just in general, the public and the public sector are quite exhausted with change right now. I don't think there's a lot of value for money at the current moment in embarking on a change like that. 10 years down the track, maybe 5, I think it would be really, really good, but yeah, I think when it comes to priorities, that's not a high one right now, personally. There was a question around this, and whether innovation should be included as well, I think, wasn't there? And I just want to speak that I do think it's really important that innovation is included in any new Ministry of Science. Because of what I said right at the beginning, that we're really great at producing science, and we need to get better at producing outputs from science. So keeping in mind right at the very start that we have to go all the way through the journey from discovery, through to development, through to impact. It should be there from the start, built in on the ground.
Thank you. So the next question we had planned was, are the Wellington Science Hubs a good idea? I will note, we're going to take it as read that the party of government that put funding forward in the budget for them thinks they're a good idea. And I will also take it as read from this question I got that National stated today they would review the Wellington Science City funding, although I'm sure the spokesperson can tell us if this is incorrect. So what I'd like our candidates to do is tell us more. If you think they're overall a good idea, how would you address the kind of common criticisms from the community about them? And if you don't think they're a good idea, what's your planned alternative proposal to do the things that the science hubs are intended to do?
Look, I do understand why you have to come out. A number of our science organisations, which happen to be already located here in Wellington, are, they all have buildings which are past end of life and they need to bless them. It's come about in chronic underfunding, like over decades, not recent, but years recent, but also over decades. And just, we keep on doing deferred maintenance on these things. We need to do something to replace these buildings now, and the baseline funding levels are not increasing in question. So I think it does make sense to consider how we can consider all these building projects together, and there are likely genuine benefits from bringing our research people closer together. On balance, I think this is probably a good approach. But I can understand the criticism that approving the spend of money before spending money on people to the point where jobs are on the line is not a good look. Bottom line, look, our people can't keep waiting, and there does need to be substantial investment in science people for us in Budget 2024. And I hope that with either of the two big parties there will be, and if TOP is involved, we will be pushing that angle as well.
Yeah, thank you. Just a reminder that Budget 23 did include investment in people, including the fellowships and the applied PhDs, but those will shortly be available for applications. Science hubs, just perhaps the tone of the question does need to remind everyone government pays for research buildings across the Motu. And even in Antarctica, we're building a new research hub there, combined plant and food and biosecurity laboratory in Auckland. I just opened one University of Waikato and NIWA collaborative building on the Waikato site for NIWA in Hamilton, and of course in the Lincoln campus we have Ag Research and Manaki Whenua co-located there. This is not just a Wellington policy. This idea of co-location means that university and CRI scientists, and in these hubs we hope business as well, will be co-located so you can enjoy that rich interaction with scientists and researchers and innovators from all different backgrounds, and those out of those connections can flow new collaborations and ideas. It's also really important for our young students to have those opportunities to see, as I did when I did my PhD. You can see when you're on a university campus where there's a biotech firm there, you can see the opportunities for your new careers if you move through there, and you could even take your applied PhD up there. So I think that's the vision, and I just want to stress it as part of a balanced set of investments across the country.
Well, one of the first things that we need to acknowledge is that if it wasn't the Wellington hubs and it was the Auckland hubs, then we would have the same critique that we are focusing on Auckland. All of it was Christchurch. And so you can't really fix that type of critique, unfortunately, but it's also important to actually educate people and make them aware that you can't always have equipment spread out across the entire country, because in certain research fields, such as medicine, such as in chemistry, there is a significant risk if you are having to transport samples across the country just to get one or two experiments done and then have them sent back to you. So we do need to actually have that type of education out there, but also we need to ensure that where possible we do fund research and development initiatives and facilities across the country, or in parts of the country where we can. Through the Provincial Growth Fund, we did do that in a few areas because there was that expertise in that area and they were able to do the research in that area. So that's one of the things that we need to do, and also ensure that when people are going to these universities, they do have that support, and I spoke about that earlier with the Universal Student Allowance.
Thank you. National is very interested in the science hubs. We would want to review these when we come into government, primarily because we want to make sure they're delivering on what they were set out to do. That there is clear outcomes, that their joint projects are delivering on areas for the priorities that are set that they are involving, that there is sustainability. So we absolutely are interested, but we want to make sure they're delivering, and we would review them when they come in.
Thank you once again to all of our spokespeople today. We are going to wrap up the questions there because we're getting very close to the end of our hour, and again we do want to respect everyone's time. So thanks to everyone who came along online and in person, as well as all of our candidates. Thank you to people in the New Zealand Association of Scientists who are not me, who did all the work to organise this, along with the people from the PSA, and also thank you to Victoria University for providing this space for us. I'm asked to note that PSA members can find out more about the PSA's election campaign at standstogether2023.co.nz. And we had one final Slido question about whether people felt that the candidates had answered their questions. So here we go. We're researchers, we like data. Here's some data for you. 53% of people felt neutrally, 6% of people were pleased, and we'll leave the rest. But regardless of the results of that, thank you to everyone for answering the questions put to them and giving us this insight into what your parties would do in government. And good luck to all of you for the election campaign ahead.